Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's preview of the Conference Championship weekend in association with our partner, Quinn Betton. Good evening to all of you tuning in to watch us live via X, Facebook, Twitch, and on our own website, irishnflshow.com. If you're watching back later on YouTube, or indeed if you're listening back on Friday or Saturday to the podcast ahead of those games, you're very welcome too. And please, as always, if you haven't done so already, would you like and subscribe or give us a review at some point on whatever podcast platform you're tuning into us on. It really does help others to find us, and it grows the Irish NFL Show community, which is already expanding at an exponential rate because it's Final Four weekend now with two places in New Orleans up for grabs in Super Bowl 59. The Chiefs host the Bills in a renewal of their great rivalry at Arrowhead in what for us will be the late game. Kickoff 11:30 there on Sunday night to decide the AFC champions. The Lamar Hunt Trophy awaits. We start, however, in our preview at the Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, once we get to some of the news lines we have on the night. And our first segment in the show tonight is brought to you by Rue Point. Kieran, I wanted to check in on happenings down south in Jacksonville because General Manager Trent Baalke, you've spoken about him many times on the show throughout the season. He is not, for people who've been watching and listening to us regularly, will know this, necessarily top of your Christmas card list, or indeed many other people's in Jacksonville. A lot of swings and misses in drafts passed in his tenure, testament to that. And the way that they play the Baalke situation, unfortunately for Jacksonville, has left them in a very difficult position regarding their ambitions to hire a hotshot head coach, because most of the flights have already left there.
Yeah, it's a very kind of Jacksonville situation. Unfortunately, it's following a pattern for this team. Not so much with Shad Khan, but, other than the 90s with Tom Coughlin and Tony Baselli, this has kind of been the calling card for the Jags, unfortunately. And, Baalke is a person who, he had his run-ins with Harbaugh in San Francisco. For whatever reason, owners really like him, whether he's a yes man or for whatever reason it may be. But he stuck around in Jacksonville. He saw through a couple of coaches. Shad Khan opened the purse strings and gave him every single free agent and signing that he wanted. But the signings have just not been there. And, not just the free agent signings, but the draft picks have missed big time. Other than BTJ this past year, it's been a poor, even Josh Hines Allen, that the book is still open on whether that's going to be a good draft pick. But just a typical Jacksonville situation. They've left themselves in a hole, and now the names swirling around are not giving a lot of hope to people in Jacksonville. Robert Saleh, Mike McCarthy is out there. Some people are saying Todd Monken, Joe Brady, but I don't think Joe Brady's going to go to a situation like that. It's a little better now that Baalke's gone. He won't have to answer to him. But I got my own questions about whether Trevor Lawrence, and this could be a topic for another day, whether head coaches see Trevor Lawrence as an attractive quarterback. We can talk some other time about the picks and the turnovers and the health issues. But
it was interesting, Kieran, when you make that point, to hear Ben Johnson's press conference in Chicago and how effusive he was in saying the reason I'm here is the quarterback, which you couldn't help, if you're looking at it from a Jacksonville perspective, but read as a bit of a knock on Trevor Lawrence. Like, you've got, in theory, an established on his day top 10 quarterback, or certainly he would be seen that way in some quarters. You have, and we've talked about it again, no income tax, warm weather, much lower expectations in Jacksonville than you have at a lot of other franchises. Like, on paper, it's a really good job. But Baalke was the thing that was hanging around there like Banquo's ghost, and potentially pulling off quality head coaching candidates. Then they're leaking, or apparently leaking through the media, the idea that, well, Baalke might not be for keeps, or they could move him aside and you could bring in your own guy if you were the right candidate. But by then the ship had sailed. Like, the bells of the ball had already found dancing partners.
Absolutely. And whether Cohn was a serious candidate, or whether he was even going to leave Tampa is another question. But I still go back to head coach's perception of Trevor Lawrence. 4 years have gone now since he's been drafted. I don't want to call them wasted years, because he's had some good games and good production. But that's 4 years where there's been no winning in Jacksonville, other than that that game that they fell into against the Chargers in the wild card game. But that's 4 years under the bridge now with Trevor Lawrence. He's had health issues. Everybody knows his ball retention issues and his fumbling issues. Is that something that's keeping head coaches away? And are they going to be left with somebody like a Mike McCarthy, Todd Monken, somebody in that kind of regard? But it's going to be interesting. A lot of people in Jacksonville are very upset with how everything's played out with Baalke and Shad Khan. He's the thing I can say about Khan is he's not an owner like so many in the league that meddles. He just lets people get on with it. He'll interject now and again, and he'll hype up like he did in the preseason, say this is the best staff and best team that I could assemble. He doesn't interfere. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe Trent Baalke had too much freedom and was given too much leeway to make the decisions he did. But now that Baalke's out, I think again they've missed out on some kind of blue chip coaches. What are they going to be left with now? In the kind of, I don't want to call it bargain basement, but they're not going to be getting the upper echelon. And I still have a feeling some of these head coaches are wary of Lawrence, his health, and his production.
One of the blue chip candidates that they potentially missed out on in Jacksonville, Kieran, is Aaron Glenn, who was the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. Ben Johnson went to Chicago. Aaron Glenn has gone to the New York Jets, where he played for many seasons and distinguished himself in a series of, unfortunately, not particularly great Jets teams. He's hoping to restore the glory, which seems further and further away for Jets fans, to a franchise that really is in desperate need of hope. Much as was the situation, to be fair, when Aaron Glenn arrived in Detroit, and look how that turned out.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice pickup for the Jets. I mean it's somebody that needed it. It's kind of.
I was asking another Kieran on that. Sorry.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry.
You can take a rest. We'll give your vocal cords time to recover. Kieran Dunham's after wearing his monogram GAA jersey, for God's sake. He deserves to take the dance floor in that. Only recently hung up the hurl and the schlitter, so we'll get him match fit yet.
Do you know what? I was going to leave Kieran work away because he speaks to the coaching and the general manager carousel a lot better than I could. But look, I've been looking at the Aaron Glenn story with interest today, because look, the number one question on my lips and a lot of people's lips is, what's he going to do about the elephant in the room? What's he going to do about Aaron Rodgers? And that's kind of the first thing that he's going to be asked about every way he looks. And I think he's after coming on record already saying he wants him in the building and he hopes that he's in the building. And then I'm looking at media across the pond, and a lot of the consensus is, well, who's out there that's better? Do they go get a quarterback in the draft? Is Kirk Cousins, the likes of a Kirk Cousins, is he going to do any better job than Aaron Rodgers? And I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure there's a better option for him.
I tend to agree, Karen. Like, Rodgers still throws a beautiful ball. Like, his mobility wasn't exactly towards the 10 on the scale if you're doing quarterback top trumps, even at his best. And that has clearly declined with age and obviously post the Achilles injury. But when he's on it, he's on it. He looks as good. You squint and you can roll back the years there quite easily. If he's got the scheme around him, if he's got the protection around him, and if the coaching is there to get the best out of what is a pretty talented unit, which we've tended to forget about because of the dysfunction there.
And dysfunction is the right word, because for all of the negativity and for all the negative talk and for all the headlines that they grabbed, the Jets still finished, I think, with a top 10 scoring defense this year. And we also know, like, the weapons that they have on offense, if they can get it rolling, pick up a few more. You never know. Aaron Glenn might be just the ticket, and he certainly had a part to play in in being part of that rising tide in Detroit. And look, I don't want to spend all off season giving false hope to Jets fans again, but we could be on the roller coaster on the carousel again this time next year.
Hey, false hope is what the off season is all about. Like, the Bears won the off season last year, and that translated into 5 wins. So I'm living on the false hope right now. It's almost a pity when the actual games start and reality sets in. Speaking of false hope, we moved to New England, Shane, where Josh McDaniels is back.
I can't believe it. What I said last year I didn't want to happen has happened, and I'm kind of happy about it. What's happened here? Why am I happy about this? It's interesting. I mean, I said it when the news came out in the group chat that it was probably the most obvious thing that was ever going to happen as soon as Jerome Mayo left, that they're going to look for Mike Vrabel to fill that slot because he hadn't been picked up in the offseason, and Josh McDaniels was going to come in and be the offensive coordinator. To his credit, forget about what Josh Daniels is like as a head coach, and it's interesting that he always got so defensive and sensitive when people start making jokes, even in a humorous way, about his time in New England. When he was in Las Vegas, he was like, "Oh no, you don't come from my New England team. Don't ever talk about my New England team like that. Those are my boys, those are my people." But you have to say that based purely on his record inside that building, he is a good offensive coordinator. So is the new Drake and Josh coordination or is the combination gonna yield results? I certainly hope so. I'd be interested to see how the offseason plays out, and recruitment is going to play a big part of it. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk about it during the long offseason. But it just seems to me like like how hell bent the Kraft family are, and make sure that they only stick with people who know the Patriot way and have very little outside experience, or if they do have outside experience, not very good outside experience, as is the case with Matt Patricia and is currently the case with Josh McDaniels, is it knows no bounds. The fact that Mike Vrabel had some time in Tennessee is about as exotic as they get. So look, it could work out well. I think recruitment is going to be a big part of it, and I'm looking forward to seeing if he can do as good a job with Drake May as he did, in fairness to him, with Mac Jones in his first season in New England.
I tip of the cap for a great Nickelodeon reference, Shane. I'm sure a lot of people would have picked that one up and raised the right smile. I was actually just Googling that as you were talking there. I can't believe that show was 21 years old, and even you must feel slightly older at that, Shane. Have you recently celebrated your birthday? Did we miss giving you the bumps?
Yeah, I was 26 on Tuesday, just to make everybody feel something.
Yeah. God, between us and all harm, like the Bears haven't won a Super Bowl in your lifetime. That's another reason to be sad, right? Let's move on and talk about the games this weekend, because in the opener, the NFC Championship is first one up. We have the Eagles at home at the Link, and in the city of the underdog, Rocky's hometown, it's the Commanders who come into this heavyweight bout, Kieran, Florida, with nothing to lose. And really, I talked about this on Monday. I hate the phrase house money. You're in it to win it. You're in a conference championship game. I haven't heard Dan Quinn, to his credit, and I haven't heard any of the Commanders, to their credit, talk about this like they're happy to be there. And even Jaden Daniels, when he came off the field in Detroit last weekend, didn't look like a guy who was dancing a jig, waiting for the confetti to fall and thinking, this is it. This is all we ever dreamed of. I've won a playoff game. These guys are and should be looking towards that Lombardi trophy. Do they have a path to get there?
Well, I mean, we didn't think they'd have a path through Detroit, and that turned out okay. God, it's a tough one. I mean, the Eagles, when I'll start with the Eagles, just the sheer, magnitude of the quality on the field. Every single player on offense and defense could be a Pro Bowler. And it seems like a mammoth task. They're 10-1 at home. Washington is coming in, is it again one of those onto the breach kind of game? And yes, it is. And I'm not going to discount them, because nobody thought they were going to get this far, and they're playing with house money. And we've seen plenty of teams in the past, notably my Giants 13 years ago, who have gone on the road, defied the odds in every game, and ended up being the champions. So I'm giving them every chance. I'm impressed with, obviously, with Daniels and his poise and his play, but not just that. It's just the ball's going for it on fourth down. They go for it on fourth down so many times. I think 6 of 9 they went in the playoffs so far. And there's just that fearlessness there. I spoke last week about the moment's never too big for him, because he's played in massive SEC stadium, so he's used to playing in front of huge crowds with a lot at stake. But just the fact that he doesn't really turn the ball over. He looks cool. He's got the wheels. He's got the wheels is a huge factor, because we've seen plenty of quarterbacks, in the league. Lamar Jackson, when there's nothing or nobody open, they take off. So that's a. I mean, Daniels has always been a runner, but he's led the team in rushing yards in a lot of the games. So I'm very high on Washington. I can go into the Eagles stuff, but I'll keep it to Washington. I just think everything's in their favor. Just basically since this time last year when they brought in Dan Quinn, you get a competent general manager, you get Magic Johnson, you get a new owner, and you look at it from a different way. They brought in executives from the NBA. Look at it from a different lens, bring in a different viewpoint. How can we change this around, and how can we look at it from all the different angles? And they've done an absolutely phenomenal job. I was on record saying I didn't think much. I think some of us did too. Didn't think much of the Commanders' chances. Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz didn't really fill us with a lot of confidence, but somehow they've managed to bring in people like Robinson and bring those veterans in with the rookies. And the magic potion is the quarterback. And Daniels has just been phenomenal all season. Dan Quinn, say a lot about him and what he's done. But again, it starts with the ownership, new ownership. Dan Snyder's a memory now, but just changing everything about that team. And it gives a lot of hope to a lot of teams in the league, where last year, I just saw a clip earlier. The Jets Greg Zuerlein made a kick against the Commanders last year that if it was missed, it would have sent the Commanders to the 5th pick instead of the 2nd. So it's these sliding doors moments. But Daniels has been the difference maker. Every team needs a quality quarterback. He's that guy. And Washington, the way they're playing right now, there's a couple of issues with injuries. Yes, that is fine. But you know what? Everyone's going to play hurt anyway. No one's going to miss this game. I would not be surprised in the least if Washington went in there and got the win. Hurts, we'll talk about the Eagles too, but I don't like what I'm hearing out of the Eagles camp with Hurts. But how can you not be impressed with this Washington team with what they've done from top to bottom, from ownership all the way down to the coaching staff? Kingsbury, what he's done. I mean, he's going to be a guy in demand too. I would not be surprised in the least if Washington went in there, but it's all about turnovers. Who's not going to turn the ball over? If they can just control the game, control the ball, the only thing, and I will say this, the only thing that makes me nervous is the run defense. That's what does make me nervous with this Washington team. But hey, listen, we've seen in the playoffs, if you can get to 30 points, that's it. I mean, they've got no problem getting to 30 points. If you can get to 30 points in the playoffs, your chances of winning are vastly improved. So I'm going to call for the upset this weekend. I think Washington beats the Philly Eagles.
I like it. Kieran O'Donovan, your Packers saw this Philadelphia team up close and personal. You had said before and after the game, the thing you were most focused on is, as Kieran from Florida is alluding to there, could they shut down the running game? Could they contain Saquon? I don't think you're ever going to shut Saquon down. He's just too good, and that offensive line is just way too good to think that you can do that. But could they contain him enough? And could they put Jalen Hurts in situations where he has to throw? And when that happened, even last weekend, the Rams had their share of opportunities. 6 sacks, I think they ended up with in the end. But they got to him. They were in the backfield, and he wasn't looking that great.
Yeah, and we saw the Washington defense and how opportunistic they were as well. When they put the Lions under pressure. You're right. You go back, look at the Eagles' progression through this offseason. The Packers had an absolute shocker of a start, and they turned the ball over early, and they put the Eagles in the exact position they wanted. They got out ahead, and they put the ball in Saquon's hands. Almost exactly the same thing happened against the Rams. The Rams turned the ball over, and the Eagles were able to comfortably run. But I won't say comfortably because it wasn't too comfortable for a finish. But they had the opportunity to run the game through Saquon Barkley. Nobody has gotten a jump on the Eagles yet, and I think that's the key. And Kieran, you covered nearly every point I was going to make. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole pile left to say, but it's turnovers.
We haven't talked about the Eagles defense much, but to your point there, right? Turnovers. We saw them play the Rams last weekend, and again, similar to the Packers game, they made it hard on themselves. They didn't pick Matthew Stafford off. He torched them for over 300 yards.
Yeah.
Massive gain to Puka Nacua, and what was an unbelievable catch, but also a great throw from Stafford. You got Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell both potentially in the defensive rookie of the year. Or one or other of them may well win that. I think probably it's going to be beyond them. It might go in Jared Verse's direction, but they've drafted well. They have a lot of big names both up front and in the secondary. Slay has had a great season, but they looked ordinary enough against the Rams. And the way that Jaden Daniels and that Washington offense have been playing, as Kieran said, you put up 30 points in the playoffs. They put up 45 against Detroit. If you're going to give them the opportunity to do so, they will take full advantage.
Yeah, and I think the Eagles will try to come out and do what they did to the Packers in terms of the absolute intensity, the way they were, like that secondary was hitting so hard in the first quarter, the first half. They absolutely rocked the Packers, and this was a young team we were talking about as well in the Packers, and they just had no answer for it. They were hit like a ton of bricks, But having said all that, Washington have gone into the link already this year, and they've come away with a win. Jaden Daniels has thrown 5 touchdown passes in the link. This is a divisional game, so home field advantage I don't think is as much of a factor when you're playing a divisional opponent. And just a point on the Commanders and what you were saying about house money resonated with me last week. You talked about house money and how you don't like that phrase, and you got me thinking, because it is a phrase I'd use a lot, and I when I say they're playing with house money, to me that means that, look, they've accomplished more than most people thought that they would accomplish. So they're not going in there with a whole, with the type of pressure that a Bills are going in with baggage, or the Chiefs going for the three-peat. So in that regard, yeah, house money is a good thing. But if you think that they're going in there saying it's okay for you to lose this game, there's absolutely no inevitability in this league. I mean, there is no guarantees that Jayden Daniels will be in this position again. Like, would you put your house on Joe Burrow getting back to a Super Bowl? As good as he is, I'm not too sure I would, because there's so many people in his way, and there seems to be some stopping point every year for him.
I think you're so right. Like, I think, to flip to another sport, I don't know if anyone has seen the Netflix documentary Breaking Point, the one with Andy Roddick and Marty Fish. And Andy Roddick was one of these talents in US tennis who was hothoused, and he was supposed to be the first men's tennis player in years, because they had a bit of a drought on that side of the house, to go on and accumulate multiple Grand Slams. And he wins his first US Open title, and he thinks, this is it, I've arrived. And then there's this great moment in the documentary, and he says, and then Roger Federer came on the scene. And then Rafa Nadal came on the scene. And then Novak Djokovic came on the scene. And that's exactly what you're talking about in the NFL at the moment. You've got to get past Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, neither of whom have managed to even play in a Super Bowl. At least Joe Burrow managed to do that. Nothing is given. And you got to take your opportunity when it comes. And I think you're so right. Who's to say that Jayden Daniels ever even gets back here again? He's in a championship game in his very first season. It's ridiculous. You just don't know what's coming around the corner. You don't know who's going to be an unexpected hit in next year's draft. Which team is going to be the next Detroit Lions? What new head coach is going to transform a previously moribund franchise, and now they become contenders? Dallas won't be sleepers forever in your own division. Giants won't be sleepers forever in your own division. You have it your own way right now. You might not even make the playoffs next year. So you got to make hay while the sun shines. And
there's no, the positive thing for Washington is there's no sign that Jayden Daniels is going to be affected by any type of this pressure. And that, that's the good thing from a Commander's point of view, because this guy in his rookie season, he's led 5 game-winning drives, so he seems like a reincarnation of Joe Cool, Joe Montana, Joe Burrow, whichever Joe you want to talk about, Tom Brady, we talked about it last week, Patrick Mahomes, these guys who you can put the ball in their hands if it's a must go and get it situation. And he seems to be a guy that can manage that. And they've played the Eagles close twice already this year, and they've come out on the right side once and the wrong side another time, but it was a one-score game both times. And who's to say if there's a score in and he gets the ball last, you'd really have confidence in him marching them up and doing the business.
Shane, it's hard to believe that at one point we were talking about Saquon's contract being a little bit spicy and whether running backs were worth that kind of money. And the Eagles are playing good old, I jest, it's not really 1980s football, but the extent to which they're leaning on the run, they're the most run-heavy team in the league, and they're right to do so, because it's paid off for them in absolute spades. It's crazy to think that AJ Brown only gets 4 targets last week, that Devontae Smith only has 4 receptions last week, that they barely even crack 100 yards between the two of them. The luxury they have in their passing game, Dallas Goedert, one of the best tight ends in the league at their disposal as well, and they don't really need to use it. It's like, they can have this luxury because Saquon will just put the whole thing on his back.
It's funny. I remember one of the first times I came onto the show before I joined full time. I was on with Colin, and we were sort of talking about the decline of the running back market and how it's not comparable to anything we've seen in any other sport. And I remember we were sitting there saying that until somebody turns around and tells the world that actually a running back can do a hell of a lot more than it's being used, because these sports work in such cyclical manners in terms of how the game is played, then we're just going to constantly feel like the running back is in nearly redundant position. And here comes Saquon Barkley being somebody who could quite legitimately be voted the most valuable player of the National Football League. Now, probably will not go to him because that's become a bit of a quarterback's award in the last couple of years. But you've seen the impact he's made on that team in terms of the mentality they have, how the players have worked together, but also the ability that he's been able to show on the field. He carried the ball 26 times in the snow against the Rams on a day when his quarterback was hurt and could only attempt to throw the ball 20 times. When these two teams played against each other, you see the two different styles of play working in tandem, because the quarterback in the Commanders was trusted to throw it 39 times. He passed for 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But that's the roller coaster you get with a quarterback versus the running back who was trying to cover for the fact that Jalen Hurts is injured. Kenny Pickett was put in the backup, and he had to carry for over 30 times. So the value that he has added to that squad is immense. And as I was mentioning when I was chatting to JP Costa in the week, is that what he has added isn't just the ability to have the stamina to keep going, the numbers that he's been getting and all that, but that explosivity, the ability to, at the right moment, just do something incredible and blow the game wide open. That's what makes this Eagles team very dangerous. And look, maybe I've been drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit too much this week about the Commanders because I'm focusing on a piece of them, and you can see my Washington Nationals cap behind me as well. But you know, when you have to give credit for the Eagles for being able to use the resources they have really well over the course of that 10-game win streak, which was ended by that Commanders loss. And Saquon Barkley is the epitome of that, as well as that defense, which we have to say. And I know a lot of us are backing Washington, and I am backing Washington as well for reasons I'll come on to in a minute. But that Eagles defense, I think, has been so key in winning those key situational plays. It's not always been about yards, as was the case against the Rams, but they got the turnovers. You know, it's not always about constantly getting sacks on the quarterback, but it is about making sure that you hold wide receivers to account. Did you stop the run game at key moments? Did you stop third down conversions? They're going to have to stop fourth down conversions against this Washington team, and that's what makes this team very dangerous and very difficult to go up against. I am siding with the Commanders though for one reason, and this isn't an original thought. This isn't a thought that only I will have, but it is because of Jaden Daniels. And I've just been so impressed with him the more I've learned about him this week. He was in a press conference during the weekend. Everyone was asking, why are you so cool? What has it been in that situations that keeps you grounded? And look, maybe this is the first time he's really getting that huge level of attention after going in and beating the Lions. And I think everyone was talking about the Commanders this week in a way that they weren't, even as much as they were talking about them during the year. But he just stepped back and was like, well, football is my happy place in comparison to the things I have to deal with in my personal life. And that's just an incredible mentality, an incredible thing to say, and a reflection that actually when he's on the field, what he's doing is having fun. I don't think he feels the pressure. It doesn't get to him. It's probably nothing compared to what he's dealt with in his, well, based on his own testimony and other things I've read about him. It's an incredible mindset, and
reminds me actually, Shane, as you say it, of the semi-final press conference before the Rugby World Cup final between South Africa and England, and Rassie Erasmus was asked about the pressure that he was under and that the team were under going to play England, who just hammered the All Blacks in the other semi-final, and he just laughed. He said, "This isn't pressure. Like, playing rugby is a privilege. You look at what's happening in our country. We get the chance to bring a little bit of happiness into people's lives. It's not pressure at all. This is where we want to be. That's the mentality you need to have in these big spots."
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because when he said that, he reminded me of Sia Kolisi, the South African, the Springbok captain,
who was sitting alongside him in that press conference.
But that's exactly what it is. I think it's a different way of seeing football that we'll talk about the AFC Championship afterwards, that I don't think everyone has, and it's one of the reasons why I trust him to be so cool, and it's the reason why Dan Quinn has been able to trust his guys to go on fourth down so often. And I just think that there's something about the magic when you compare it to the situation in Philadelphia, when we don't know what the story is of Jalen Hurts. How hurt is he? We don't know. He was limited training on Wednesday. We don't know what situation he's going to be in. Yes, it looks like it's going to be snowing in Philadelphia on Sunday. Is that going to affect the Commanders as much as it affected a dome team like like Los Angeles? Probably not. There's no reason for this magic to stop, because they actually haven't had enough time to sit down and overthink things, because they've had to play every week. If they had a bye week, or if this is going from one season to another, that's when sophomore slumps happen, as we saw in Houston. There's no reason for this thing to stop unless Philadelphia actually actively go out and stop them, because everything has been playing so well. And the comparisons to Jaden Daniels to Tiger Woods and Roger Federer aren't completely unwarranted that have been made this week. And I trust these guys to find a way to pull it out. And it's not hopeful thinking, because the franchise, I think, that's going to need a bit of TLC. The last time I was in the States, I went to a game in Landover, Maryland, and it wasn't a good experience. So it's nice to know that those fans are experiencing something really fun. First time they're in an NFC Championship game in 33 years. But I don't know. I just have a funny feeling, a bit like Kieran Boyle, that they might be able to get the job done here.
What's funny, I'm kind of surprised because I thought I was going to be the only one flying the flag for the Commanders, and I'm actually going Commanders as well. I think they will win. And okay, part of that is that I do, as I've confessed before, sometimes fall victims to America's game and the narrative fallacy, and I just think about what a nice story it would be at the end of the season. And part of me is just hoping that they do it because we saw the Lions fall. That was such a beautiful story. It's been so great for Detroit. It's been so wonderful to see a franchise that's been beaten down for so long turn it around and play the way they have, and get their fixer-upper quarterback in Jared Goff and get him playing. The Commanders have done it in a very different way, and it's seemingly happened almost overnight. New owner, new GM, new head coach, new quarterback. Let's go. What's not to love about that, though? And what's not to love about the way this kid has played? I think, as you said, Shane, and you alluded to it as well, Kieran, it was something that was in my mind. You get teams sometimes that just the hot hand going into the playoffs. It has to struggle a bit to get there, but has the momentum behind them, and suddenly the belief aligns with that momentum, and it becomes a fairly heady cocktail. Kieran's Packers did it one year with Aaron Rodgers at the helm as well, where they were very, very much underdogs to even make the playoffs. The next thing you know, they're winning it all. It can go that way. Whether they get to the next step once they get to the Super Bowl, I don't know, but I can see them getting there, and I'm picking them this weekend. Kieran, you wanted to make a point on the Eagles passing game quickly, and we need your pick as well before we move on.
Yeah, it's just again listening to media across in America. They seem to think that Jalen Hurts, look, he is going to play. It's an NFC Championship game. I don't think there's a question whether he's going to play, but in reports from the field say that he's not moving, as well as he can, and he's going to be severely limited during the weekend. I think there was a stat that before he went down last week, he had something like 71 yards, and he finished after that, he was -1 yards rushing. And I know Jalen Hurts isn't a Lamar Jackson on the ground, but you still do have to account for him. I mean, he broke off, it was a 40-yard touchdown run last weekend. So it's important to note for the Commanders that, and for the Eagles side, that that read option isn't exactly going to be there. That RPO isn't going to be as unpredictable. Like the Commanders are going to have that much more of an opportunity than the Rams and the Packers to sell out to stop the run. And so I think you might see a more active passing game at the weekend. And if you are, you're going to have to see a step up from Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, because the Eagles passing game in this playoffs has been Dallas Goedert. From what I've seen, it's been short passes to Dallas Goedert, he's come up trumps. I mean, I don't think Corey Valentine will thank him for the three stiff arms in a row a couple of weeks ago. He's stood up to the fore, but you're going to have to see more AJ Brown, more of Devontae Smith if the Eagles are to do what they will expect to do. They're the favorite team. We're actually, it's looking like we're unanimous. I'm picking the Commanders as well, but I mean, we seem to be very confident in the fact that the Eagles are going to lay an egg. Look, there's every chance the Eagles have the talent across the board, exactly as Kieran said, from top to bottom. They're an absolutely super talented team. It's just the fact that they've stumbled so much through the playoffs. I think I have more confidence in the Commanders. And Chris Broussard, I liked his take on it during the week. He said, "I'm sick of being shocked by the Commanders. No matter what happens, I'm not shocked by the Commanders anymore." And I don't think anybody is going to be shocked if the Commanders win at the weekend. It's not to say they will, but I'm picking them anyway.
All right, love it. That brings us to the end of our preview of the NFC Conference Championship game. Well, we move on now, and the winner in Philly, which we're all saying is going to be the Commanders, will await the victor in the primetime game later on that night, 11:30 Irish time, between the Chiefs and the Bills. This is a pairing that we've become used to seeing in the postseason. 4-4 between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, but 3-0 for Mahomes in the playoffs. He's only beaten Josh Allen once in the regular season, but he's taken him down 3 times where it counts, including, of course, in one of the more famous and classic AFC Conference Championship games of recent times, the infamous 13-second game where the Chiefs triumphed in overtime before ultimately going down in the Super Bowl. But let's see what happens this time around, because the Bills, aside from the Broncos in a meaningless game where the Chiefs rested their starters, Kieran, in Florida, were the only team to actually beat the Chiefs in a meaningful game this season. Does that mean anything going into this? We often see regular season games don't tend to be an indicator for what's going to happen in the postseason. But at one level, I think it probably means more for the Bills than it does for the Chiefs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Any wins that one of these two teams have against each other is a massive kind of bragging point. It's a massive kind of locker room kind of motivation. I think the fact that that they beat them this year and pretty, made a statement. That's going to count for a lot. The Bills this year, I've been massively impressed. I mean, we all know what happened when the stench of Stephon Diggs left the building. But I think the way that Allen has just brought everybody together, and the fact that and we've talked about this before, the city of Buffalo, everyone. I mean, I love watching the Bills Mafia videos. I mean, that's just, who doesn't want that in a Super Bowl? I think the fact that they've galvanized again that city. We want a repeat of the Four Falls of Buffalo DVD. We want to have these storylines again. And I think the fact that the Bills have played so well this year. Now, they're going on the road to, Arrowhead, which is a frightening place to go to. But I think the fact that the Bills did so much work against the Ravens last week is going to stand them really, really strongly this weekend. They blitzed the hell out of Lamar last week, and I think that kind of blueprint's going to be there again. They can't let Mahomes get a happy feedback there and just run for those 7-8 yard first down runs like he does. And it's going to take a mammoth game from that defense. Russo, Epinesa.
Kieran, if we're talking strength of schedule and quality of wins, if we go into our college football vocabulary for a moment, if we look at those two divisional round victories, I think the Bills one is worth a lot more than the Chiefs one. Like, well and all as the Texans played, I didn't see anything that scared me from the Chiefs side of the ball. Bills had their hands full with an excellent Ravens team. There really wasn't much in that. And that was a very impressive win for me. I thought the Ravens were a team that were built to go the whole way. They are built to go the whole way. They're stacked top to bottom on that roster. They are the best team in theory that the Bills will face all year. They took them down.
Oh, absolutely. That goes without saying. But this Bills team, I mean, they've scored over the course of the season. They've got 138 points on turnovers. That's what's going to have to get them the win this weekend. Mahomes protects the ball really well. We've seen in the past where, there's been drops by, various Chiefs wide receivers, but they've got to turn the ball over. They've got to obviously win the turnover battle, but it's going to have to be by 2 or 3 to get the win in this game. They, on offense, they've converted, 86% of the red zones to touchdowns. But they do lead the NFL in turnover margin, and that's what's going to be the key for them. They've got to blitz Mahomes, make sure he doesn't get happy feet back there and get out of the pocket. But they've also got to win the turnover battle, and that defense alone has got enough to do that. I really like the way that they've kind of.
So I wonder, Kieran, as you say, and I think it's an excellent point that the Bills that defense lives on turnovers, and it's been critical for them. We know how crucial it is in the postseason. There's 2 teams sitting at home, the Lions in particular, who. And the Ravens, who wish they could have had a couple of throws back and might have been in a very different situation. You've got to take care of the ball in the postseason, even more so than in the regular season. The Chiefs play clean football. They haven't done anything spectacular, but they've let other teams make their mistakes. Like, in a funny way, I think, because I don't think you can rely. The Chiefs just aren't going to beat themselves. I don't think you can rely on them to do that. You're going to have to expect that they don't make mistakes. I think to the point that you're making, we need to see more from that Buffalo front four. Good and all as they are, they're mid-table when it comes to sacks over the course of the season. They're not taking down their man. And unless you actually put Mahomes to the turf, and even if you do put him to the turf, you might be facing a 15-yard penalty. He knows how to sell an unnecessary roughness flag, as we all know. We don't necessarily need to go there. I don't think you can necessarily rely on the turnovers in the way that they were able to against Baltimore. So you're going to need to get home, and I do think we need to see that Bills front four find an extra level.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, at this stage of the season, everyone's got to play lights out. Everyone's got to, from Oliver to Terrell Bernard, Rasul Douglas, Taylor Rapp. Everyone on defense has got to ball out. That's really it, because Mahomes is so dangerous. And even when you got him on a 4th and 4, or 4th and 3, he'll find a way, like he did with Kelsey last week. I mean, this is going to have to be, all points blasting from every single player on the Bills defense. And I want to see what Bobby Babich is going to draw up. I mean, is it going to go blitz heavy like they did against Lamar, or are they going to drop back a little bit and see what Mahomes has? See if do the wide receivers scare them all that much, or another person to watch is Pacheco, who hasn't played for a lot of the season. Now he's got the fresh wheels. Is he going to be somebody that they're going to hand it off to and let him run 20, 25 times? So those are all the things that the Bills are going to have to face. That defense, the Bills defense, I mean, like I said, they ran up the blitz 42% of the time against Lamar last week. is that the recipe that's going to get past Patrick Mahomes this weekend? You got to stop him. You got to block stuff the box, and then you got to those corners and those safeties got to have X-ray vision or 360 vision for this whole entire game. I do like the Bills to win this because I think, like we've been saying all season, this Chiefs run has got to stop at some stage. They've been so I don't want to say unattractive, but just not entertaining to watch. I'll call it as it is. They're grinding out wins, much to other teams kind of I don't know how to phrase it, but they're just grinding these.
It's funny. Like I was thinking about this earlier on today. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. You remember their first Super Bowl in the Tyreek Hill era. That team was so much fun to watch. You remember them going 17 points down against Houston. That was a sort of deficit that used to be insurmountable in the NFL. If a team came from 3 scores behind, it was a red letter day. The Chiefs just go touchdown, 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 touchdown. They just seem to be able to score at will. It was so explosive. Mahomes stretching the field, Mahomes scrambling when he needed to. It was just sensational to watch. It was absolutely box office entertainment. Now the NFL has the Chiefs where the NFL wants teams to be, where you're punished for your success, where they try and drag you down to the mean, where they try and make it more difficult because it makes it more competitive, of course. And the Chiefs have so far managed to resist the pull of gravity, and they've gotten to a situation where they can make do, they can mend, they've got bits and pieces in. To be fair to them, even having the low draft picks, they've managed to pull a couple out. Xavier Worthy looks like he might be, no pun intended, one of the potential X factors for them in this game. But it's not as fun as it once was. And while there is historic resonance in the possibility of them getting 3 in a row, I think more and more, and you saw the amount of people jumping on the Chiefs last week for being the perceived referees' favourites and getting favourable calls, it's kind of grating on people. And much though I think it will be celebrated if they do manage to get that third one of the trophy cabinet, I think an awful lot of people, probably myself included if I'm being honest, would love to see a Bills Commanders Super Bowl, because you'd love to see one of those two fan bases get what they deserve. Two great sets of fans, 2 long-suffering sets of fans for very different reasons. Buffalo obviously have been there or thereabouts and not quite got over the edge. The Commanders have come from nowhere after years in the absolute wilderness. I'd love to see a Bills Commanders Super Bowl, I have to say. However, I picked the Chiefs at the start of the season, and I'm not gonna change horses at this point because I want the bragging rights of having picked them the whole way through if they do manage to go on and do it. So I'm going to lay my cards on the table there. Kieran O'Donovan, I love a good coordinator clash. Joe Brady, Steve Spagnuolo is one such. Spags has been sensational again this postseason. We talked about it the other day. His timing, his disguise on the blitzes, the way he can put even the most experienced quarterbacks in the blender has been a joy to watch. If there is something joyous to watch about the Chiefs, it's his resurgence. In Spags, we trust the T-shirts that the Chiefs players were wearing ahead of last year's Super Bowl for good reason. But in Joe Brady, the Bills trust. He's created an offense where we didn't think one was possible post the departure of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. It's a team of no stars, except it's a team of the most important star of all, because they got Josh Allen.
Yeah, and you're right. Look, these are the 2 coordinators that the focus has been on, and rightly so. Steve Spagnuolo, we've said an awful lot about him last week. I mean, when you look at these 2 teams, I was looking down through the team stats on offense and defense, and a lot of them are quite vanilla. Neither team actually jumps to the top of the page in a lot of the meaningful stats. Fair enough, the Bills they're one of the top scoring offenses, but bar that, in terms of yards, in terms of defense, offense, they're down the rankings a little bit. But I suppose it's the immeasurables or the intangibles that you look at and you say, no, these 2 guys are top quality. Steve Spagnuolo, we talked about it every time so far that the Chiefs have had to have a moment when they had to put the pressure on Stroud and shut down any potential comeback. He just blitzed, he went all out blitz and just got that pressure on at the right time and just put him on the ground early. He seems to have the right call every single time. He seems to know what's coming. And I put that down again to consistency, the fact that they've managed to keep him all this time. Like, you look at the Detroit Lions, how much are they going to regress now when both of their coordinators are gone next year? It's very interesting to see how Dan Campbell keeps that thing rolling. So look, Spagnuolo is, I think he's he's definitely in the top 4 in terms of Mahomes, Reed, Spagnuolo, Kelsey, they're the four names that deserve nearly all of the credit for the Chiefs' prolonged success, and Spagnuolo is just as important as any one of those four. And on the other side of the ball, you mentioned Joe Brady and what he's done for the offense. I mean, he's elevated Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, who we weren't expecting to feature hugely this season. James Cook has been phenomenal all season, but I think where I'd be most impressed is what he's helped to do. And Josh Allen gives him an awful lot of credit in developing this mature version of Josh Allen. We talked about.
Did you see that great clip of Josh Allen talking about? You saw in the goal line play where they got stopped last week, and Allen for a moment looks like he's going to try and lateral the ball in the middle of the mall, which would have been a terrible decision. It would have been so risky and could have gone so badly wrong. He was asked about it in the press conference, and they said, "Were you trying to lateral the ball?" He said, "Well, I thought about it." And one of the reporters asked a great follow-up question. He said, "Would younger Josh have lateraled that ball?" And he smirked and said, "Yeah, probably would."
And that's you've been peeky at my notes, Connor, because that's exactly where I was going with that. But that has been the difference. And like Josh Allen's going to come under, he's going to come under this pressure this weekend, because Mahomes and Kelsey are going to do some fantastic things, and there may even be an early turnover. Steve Spagnuolo might dial something up early on, and what you need is a cool reaction. And I said he went down. He beat the Broncos by. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. They just kept the ball, and it was time of possession, as opposed to Josh Allen having to go all out and go on air raid and be a hero with his legs and everything like that, which we know he can do and he will do if he has to do it as well. But look, we talk about it. I just wanted to make a point about history again. I think we were all sitting around last weekend, and we were on the WhatsApp group, and we were saying, "Oh God, there's a bit of an air of inevitability about this, that the Chiefs are going to come along to Arrowhead next week. They're going to roll into the Super Bowl and they're going to three-peat, because history tends to repeat itself in this league." But if you think about it in the longer term, history tells us that the Chiefs are going to lose this weekend. Okay, and bear with me. In 1990, Kieran, you'll have fond memories, and Brian will have fond memories of Jeff Hostetler and the New York Giants going to the Super Bowl. That was supposed to be Joe Montana, and it was supposed to be the 49ers. That was supposed to be their three-peat, and they rolled to the NFC Championship game, and they were on the way until Roger Craig fumbled the ball. So it was these big, reliable players, they got caught up and they made that mistake in that moment, and it was costly. Troy Aikman and the Cowboys rolled in again to the 49ers when they were supposed to three-peat in 94. He threw a pick six in the first minute, Eric Davis. They turned the ball over 3 times, and the Cowboys never recovered. It was supposed to be their three-peat. I know they didn't have Jimmy Johnson, and they had Barry Switzer, but that was a team that was all primed to make the move. Just because we think it's going to happen, just because we think they have all of the bodies and all of the players in place, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. We've been on the cusp of it before, and if history is going to repeat itself, I'm telling you, the Chiefs are going to lose this weekend.
I think you're on mute there, Connor, are you? Somebody tried to silence us after the history lesson that the Chiefs are going to collapse in their three-peat.
I love the Hostetler reference. I haven't heard that name in a while.
No, Connor, you're still gone.
Right, I suppose what Connor is trying to reconnect himself. I'll give my piece, because I appreciate the history that you've brought there, Kieran. And obviously, as a fan of one of those teams who tried to get the three-peat and could have got it done, and maybe I have a slight bit of a vested interest in not seeing the Chiefs get it done. I just look at this particular matchup, though, and we can forget about the Super Bowl, which, by the way, if we're talking about what fan bases want to reach the Super Bowl, could you imagine Bills versus Eagles in New Orleans? There wouldn't be a safe lamppost, table, bar anywhere. Those Bills fans and Eagles fans would end up making having party central in that place. That would be incredible scenes. But in terms of what I actually think is going to happen, we have to look at the Bills and the way that they performed against Baltimore, right? And against Baltimore, you can beat them by either playing well or by getting the better plays. In that game, the Ravens played better, but the Bills got the better plays. You can't do that against the Chiefs, especially not at Arrowhead Stadium. You go back to the game that we referred to, and I referred to a couple of times this week, when Josh Allen, who so far is the only quarterback to beat Patrick Mahomes this season, managed to get one over the Chiefs. That time in Buffalo, as opposed to doing so in Arrowhead Stadium. That was a game when the Chiefs, when the Bills played the better football and got the better plays. They turned over the ball from Patrick Mahomes a couple of times. They got way more passing yards. They got more rushing yards, more time of possession, more third down efficiency. There was a fourth down conversion thrown in there. That's a game when from start to finish, you are on top. And that's what needs to happen for the Bills coming into Arrowhead Stadium. From start to finish, they need to be on top and in control of the game. They can't rely on Mark Andrews dropping the ball and the 2-point conversion not going over. They can't rely on Lamar Jackson being under pressure and letting it slip because he couldn't just take the sack and trying to throw it off. That happens against the Ravens. That does not happen in Arrowhead Stadium against the Chiefs. We've learned that so much. And no matter how little sense this Chiefs team seem to make when they don't play so well, but they keep getting this far into the playoffs, we have to acknowledge the fact that the Chiefs are wonderful game managers.
I think you're so right, Shane. And Colin Cronin used to say, with tongue in cheek, that Patrick Mahomes is the ultimate game manager. Which is usually the damning with faint praise line that you put on a quarterback. Oh, he's a game manager, but Mahomes is the ultimate manager of a game in the most literal sense. He does what it takes. He's not going for the splash player if it's not there. I mean, if you were watching the Super Bowl last year, only one time did Mahomes go deep, and he hit it when he had to have it. He hit Mecole Hardman. Funnily enough, it didn't count because the Chiefs fumbled the ball away when they were on the goal line on the next play, and that one ends up being forgotten about. But they just waited for the 49ers to make mistakes, as they waited for Baltimore to make mistakes in the championship game. Chiefs took advantage of Zay Flowers' unfortunate fumble and leading to a touchback at the goal line. They scored twice, 10 points on 2 drives, and they didn't score again for the rest of the game, and they let the Ravens flounder then. Very similar to what they did against the Texans. There's a blocked field goal. That's really the only mistake the Texans make in the game. The Chiefs largely just sit back and do what they do and let other people come to them. They know that the moment is going to be too big for a lot of other teams. That's probably not to give them the due credit for the plays that they make when they need to make the plays, both offensively and defensively. And I'm highlighting certain aspects of what they do to make a point. But if you contrast where Buffalo were last year, and we remember that Patrick Mahomes locker room, this is what they wanted. Buffalo talked a great game about how they were finally going to get the Chiefs in their place, and they put some manners on them. But the moment was too big for the Bills. It wasn't for the Chiefs. This moment isn't going to be too big for the Chiefs. So what do you need to do? You need to look after your own game. You can't expect them to blow up. I think you're right. I think they have to get out in front. I think they have to diffuse the aura of invincibility that the Chiefs have. They can't rely on this loser underdog mentality of, let's just hope we keep it tight and we get to the fourth quarter and see what happens in the last 5 minutes. That's when the Chiefs thrive. You don't want it to be a game in the last 5 minutes. You need the game to be over because you played so well.
It's as if the Bills need to play in a way that the Chiefs make their own mistakes, and that just doesn't happen at this time of the year unless something catastrophic goes wrong. And rightfully so, and in fairness to the rest of you, you've probably spelled it out in a better way than I could in terms of the way coordinators are going to play a big part in how this game is played, the change in Josh Allen going on. But a huge amount of this game is played between the ears, and you just think to yourself, who sleeps better that Saturday night? Patrick Mahomes, who's been here before, who's 3-0 against the Bills in the playoffs, who's at home, knows exactly how to manage the games, to use that phrase you're using there earlier, Connor, and get things done, and just will be confident in everything he's doing from start to finish. Or Josh Allen, who knows that his legacy is on the line here. And the only comparison I can make of this is it's like when I go down to the driving range and I whack out the golf club, and I know full well I can hit that golf ball 250 yards. I've done it a million times. The same way Josh Allen has gone in and he's beaten Patrick Mahomes more times in the regular season than Patrick Mahomes has beaten him. By the time you get on that first tee, you know full well you're hopping into that ditch and where the tree line is. And I just feel like that's how Josh Allen is going to be in these situations. There's going to be a moment, and it's funny, we're looking at QuinnBet at the moment. I think the Chiefs are 1-point favorites in this. It's a very close game in the money line, roughly 50-50 the amount of money is being placed on it, very similar to last week's game between the Bills and the Ravens. And there are so many arguments either way as to why each of these teams can win based on talent, based on what they've done this season.
It reminds me, Shane, if anybody's seen Succession, there's a great scene outside a restaurant where Kendall is trying to convince Tom to come to his side, and they're talking about the family patriarch, who's loosely based on Rupert Murdoch, obviously, although Succession is a work of fiction, I hasten to add. And Tom says to Kendall, "But Kendall, I've seen you get fucked lots of times. I've never seen Logan get fucked once."
That's
always wins.
That's what it is, though. So, look, I'm in a similar boat to you, Connor, in that until I see somebody go in and take down the Chiefs, and I love JP Acosta's version of it on the podcast he did this week, as if going into Arrowhead is the final boss mission on a Mario game or something like that. That's what it's like. So until somebody goes in and gets it done, I'm choosing to believe that the Bills mightn't be able to get over the line, but it wouldn't shock me if they play well enough to get it done. This is going to be a great game to watch on Sunday night.
Right, we've moved from Drake and Josh to Succession in a sweeping series of pop culture references, but that brings us to the end of our championship preview. We've got all our picks in. All that's left to do now is to dig in, get the chicken wings and the beer and watch that game. Or if you're still doing dry January, it'll be a soda or a water for you to watch those championship games at 8 and 11:30 at the weekend. We've plenty more content, though, coming up for you between now and Sunday night, so stay with us on the Irish NFL Show.